Suretyship. It's like one of those things you've probably run into it without even realizing.
Yeah.
Like co-signing a loan, right?
Yeah.
Vouching for a friend for some business deal.
Yep.
That sounds familiar, right? But under all of that, like those everyday things, there's this whole legal landscape, and it can get kind of tricky.
It can.
So today we are going on a deep dive.
Yes, we are.
We're digging deep because you sent us this document.
Yes.
About suretyship. We're going to get into all the ins and outs of it.
Absolutely.
So by the time that we are done with this deep dive,
right,
you will be able to explain suretyship to anybody.
Yes.
You'll know exactly what it is, how it works, all of that.
To anybody who asks.
You sent us some really interesting stuff on this topic. So we're going to go through all of it. Like, we're going to break down who's involved, what are the rights and risks for everyone, and even like how can you get out of it? What are the get out of jail free cards for suretyship?
That's right. Yeah.
You know?
Kind of like we're learning a new language almost. Like once we understand what all the words mean and like how this game is played, it's going to bring you a lot of clarity to these situations that maybe you've been in before and been like, I don't really understand what's going on here.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's start with the very basics.
Okay.
The source that you sent defines suretyship really well. It lays out who are all the players, right?
Right.
There are three key players. We've got the creditor, who is basically, I think of them as the lender.
Yeah.
And then there's the principal debtor. And that is the one who is borrowing the money.
Borrowing the money and promising to pay it back.
Exactly.
Yes.
And this is where you come in.
Yes.
You are the surety.
Yeah.
And you're basically saying, hey, I got your back.
Yes.
If they don't pay up, I will.
Right.
And this is where it gets really important to understand the difference between like a surety and a guarantor.
That's right. Yes.
And our source really makes this point very clear.
Yes.
A surety is directly liable.
That's right.
So that means the creditor can come after you directly, even before going to the principal debtor.
That's right.
So it's not a last resort kind of thing.
Right.
You're on the hook from the get-go.
You are. That's why this whole my legs thing that the source mentions for the statute of frauds, I love that.
Okay, I have to admit, when I first saw my legs in the notes, I thought we were taking a little detour.
Yeah.
But this mnemonic, it's genius.
I know, I love it.
Because it's so memorable. And it just emphasizes this point that in order for a suretyship agreement to be enforceable, it has to be in writing.
Yes.
No handshake deals here.
No.
Get it in writing.
My legs, marriage, year, land, executor goods, and suretyship.
That's right. So this is to remind us that these kinds of agreements fall under the statute of frauds.
That's right.
And they need that written documentation.
Yes.
So if you're thinking about becoming a surety,
right,
first takeaway, get it in writing.
Yes.
Protect yourself. Now, I'm guessing that maybe you're thinking,
right,
okay, so I'm putting myself on the line here, but what about my rights?
Right.
Like, what protection do I have in this whole thing?
Right, exactly. That's where it gets interesting because before a default even happens, a surety's rights are, let's just say, limited.
Okay.
The source gives us some really good examples. Like, you don't automatically have the right to be notified if the debtor starts missing payments, which is crazy.
Oh, wow.
And the creditor isn't even obligated to go after the principal debtor first.
It does make you wonder why anyone would agree to be a surety.
Right.
If you have no rights.
Right. Well, sometimes there are compelling reasons, like, personal relationships or business arrangements or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think it underscores how important it is to know what you're getting into, like, right from the start. Because you don't automatically have all these safeguards in place. Like, you're directly liable. And that is a key takeaway here.
So it's about going in with your eyes wide open, basically.
Exactly.
Not assuming that there are all these things to protect you.
Right.
You are directly liable. That's a key takeaway. But it's not all doom and gloom for the surety, right?
Right, right.
Because there is this concept of subrogation that the source mentions, which sounds like it could be a bright spot.
It could be. It's very interesting.
Okay.
Think of it this way. Let's say a factory is used as collateral for a loan. Okay.
Right.
If the debtor defaults and the surety ends up having to pay the debt, subrogation basically allows the surety to step into the shoes of the creditor.
So they might get the factory.
Exactly. It's a way for sureties to recover their losses and potentially even come out ahead. Wow.
But of course, the source is careful to point out that it's not always a guaranteed win.
Right.
Like you don't just automatically inherit a perfectly good, like, operational factory.
Right.
There could be other leads on the property or like The market value might have gone down.
Totally, yeah.
It's not a sure thing, but it is a tool, and it's important to understand how it works.
Okay. So subrogation is one of the rights that a surety might have. What else?
So you also have the option to sue the debtor directly
Oh, okay.
to make them pay.
Okay.
And that's called exoneration,
Okay.
which is essentially you saying, hey, I'm on the hook for this debt, but you're the one who actually owes the money.
Yeah.
So you need to pay up.
I can see how that would be useful, like if you were the surety and you can kind of see the writing on the wall.
Yeah,
Right. Maybe that principal debtor is not doing so hot.
Exactly.
You could get out ahead of it.
Exactly. And then there's reimbursement or indemnification.
Okay.
And these are pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Like if you, as the surety, you end up paying off the debt,
Right.
then you have the right to get that money back from the debtor.
Okay, so it's like, okay, I covered for you this time, buddy.
Right.
But you owe me.
You owe me. Yes.
Yeah.
It makes sure that the surety isn't left holding the bag, basically.
Right, because you're stepping in to help, but the ultimate responsibility is on that original borrower.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, so we've been talking about these situations with one surety, but the source gets into a whole other level of complexity when there are multiple sureties.
Car sureties.
Yes, car sureties. Right, so this is when you have more than one person or even sometimes an entity that agrees to back up a debt.
Right.
Think about it like co-signing on a lease with your roommates, right?
Yeah.
If one person skips out on the rent, the landlord can go after any or all of you
Right.
for the full amount of the rent.
For all of it. Wow.
Yeah.
And that's where the joint and several liability comes in.
Exactly.
So each surety is like on the hook for everything.
Yes, they are, if they have to be.
Wow.
And if the agreement doesn't say how much each co-surety is liable for, they're usually responsible, like proportionally.
Okay.
Pro rata share, it's called.
Okay.
So, like, if there are 3 co-sureties
Okay.
and one of them goes bankrupt, let's say, then the other 2 are now each on the hook for half the debt.
So that bankrupt person's share just disappears.
Well, not exactly vanishes. It gets redistributed to the solvent co-sureties.
So it gets a little more complicated. What happens if, like, those 3 friends all agree to pay different amounts?
Right. Well, that's where this idea of contribution comes in. So if one co-surety ends up paying more than their original share,
Right.
then they can sue the other co-sureties.
To make up the difference.
To make up the difference. Yes,
All right.
exactly.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, the source gives an example like, imagine 3 friends, they co-sign on a loan.
I've been there.
Yeah.
Not with a loan, but like back in college with an apartment.
Oh, yeah.
It gets messy when you're relying on people to hold up their end of a bargain.
I can imagine. That's why you really have to have a good agreement in place.
Yeah.
Like with your other co-sureties.
Right.
That's essential, I would say.
Clear communication.
Yes.
Everything spelled out.
Yes.
That could save you a lot of headaches later.
Absolutely.
Speaking of avoiding headaches,
Right.
let's talk about those get-out-of-jail-free cards for sureties.
Yes.
The source calls these defenses.
Defenses.
And frankly,
Yeah.
these sound like must-knows for anyone who's even thinking about being a surety.
They are, absolutely. I mean, one of the most straightforward ones is like, what if the debtor was like tricked by the creditor into the agreement in the first place?
Oh, okay.
Like we're talking about like fraud, misrepresentation.
So like if the agreement itself was invalid.
Exactly. Or
Yeah.
like if there was duress involved.
Okay.
So meaning like the surety was forced into the agreement. Like they didn't actually want to do it, but they were forced to. You can't be bullied into being a surety.
Okay, good to know.
And then the source also mentions a few others, like what if the agreement was for something illegal?
Right, right.
Obviously, that would be a defense. Or if the debtor is legally incapacitated,
Okay.
you know, or if the surety lacks the capacity to like actually enter into the contract, like maybe they're a minor or something like that.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
So it sounds like they've really thought of everything here
they have. Yeah.
to protect sureties.
Yeah. And one that I think is really interesting is like lack of consideration.
What does that mean?
So for a suretyship agreement to be enforceable, there has to be consideration.
Okay.
Meaning like something of value has to be exchanged.
Okay.
So the source uses this example of a car loan. If you agree to be the surety, okay, on your son's car loan, but you agree to it before the dealership agrees to give him the car,
Okay.
that promise to be the surety is enforceable because in theory, your agreement to be the surety helped make the deal happen.
Oh, so you're providing something of value, in exchange for them finalizing the loan.
Exactly.
Okay.
But if you only agree to be the surety after the car is sold and the loan is finalized, that's different.
Okay.
Because there's no consideration there.
Because the deal's already done. It's like you're saying, hey, I'm willing to back this up, but they're like, don't worry about it, we're good.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that actually leads into a really important point about any changes to the original agreement. So like a gratuitous surety, someone who's not getting paid to be a surety, they can actually be completely off the hook if NEY changes are made to the agreement without their consent.
Oh, wow.
But if you're what's called a compensated surety, which means you're getting something in return for, taking on that risk.
Right.
Then the changes usually have to be like pretty significant,
Yeah.
And like actually increase the surety's risk. For them to be released from liability.
So it's like you can tweak it a little bit.
Yeah.
But if you make it riskier for me, I'm out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to pay really close attention to any modifications made after the initial agreement.
Right.
Because even what seems like a small change can have big implications.
Totally. All of this comes back to being informed, being proactive, like really understanding, no matter what side of this agreement you're on, you got to know what's up.
Absolutely.
And we've been talking a lot about the perspective of the surety.
Yeah.
But what about the creditor? What happens if, the debtor just can't pay?
Right.
What happens then?
Well, the source points out that creditors do have options even beyond just going after the surety.
Okay.
So one thing is this thing called a creditor's composition.
Okay.
So it's basically like a negotiation.
Okay.
Where the debtor says, okay, I can pay you this much of what I owe.
Right.
And in exchange, forgive the rest of it.
Okay. So it's like a compromise.
It is. It's a compromise. Yeah. And then there's this other thing, which is like a more formal process called an assignment for the benefit of creditors. And in this case, the debtor voluntarily will hand over some or all of their assets to what's called a trustee.
Okay. And what does a trustee do?
The trustee manages and distributes the assets to the creditors.
Okay, that makes sense. So those are some options, but what if those options just don't work out? What are the creditors' legal tools at that point?
Right. Well, they have a couple. One is something called judicial liens.
Okay. And
basically, this allows a creditor to go after a debtor's property.
Okay.
Like a house or a car.
So it's like putting a legal claim on their stuff.
Exactly. And if it needs to happen, the court can order that property to be sold and the money to go to the creditors.
Wow. Okay.
And then there's garnishment.
Garnishment, yeah. I've always wondered how that works.
Yeah, so garnishment is when a creditor can actually go after a debtor's assets, but assets that are held by someone else.
Oh.
So think wages or bank accounts.
So if you owe money, your employer might get contacted and they'll have to give a portion of your wages.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Man.
But it's important to note that there are limitations here.
Okay.
Creditors can't just take everything.
Right.
And there are laws in place to protect debtors. For example, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act.
Yes.
Which sets, limits on what debt collectors can do.
Right. Like how and when they can contact people, all that.
Exactly.
Okay, good. It's good to know there are some guardrails there.
Yes, absolutely.
So, wow, this deep dive, we have covered so much.
Yeah.
We've talked about, who all the players are in this whole world of suretyship.
Right.
What are the risks? What are the rights? What happens when things go wrong?
What to do?
For everybody involved. So,
yeah.
What are some of the things that, our listeners should remember from all of this?
I think the main takeaway here is that suretyship, while common, it's not something to enter into lightly.
Right.
It is a serious legal thing, and it can have some really big consequences.
Don't just sign on the dotted line without knowing what's up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And remember, you have rights, whether you're a surety or a creditor, and you have options.
Yes.
So knowledge is power here.
Totally. I was thinking back to something you said earlier about fraudulent conveyances.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It's kind of scary. It's fascinating, but it's also kind of scary to think about the things that people will do to get out of debt.
It is.
So, I don't know. It really underscores the importance of due diligence.
It does.
For everybody, really.
It does.
So be careful out there.
Yes, be careful.
That's all I can say.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of suretyship.
Yes, thank you.
We hope you found it, helpful, maybe a little bit entertaining.
Yes.
And, if you want to learn more about fraudulent conveyances, that's your homework.
There you go. Yeah.
That's your homework for after the show. And as always, we love hearing from you, our listeners.
We do.
So, share your questions, your thoughts, your anecdotes, all of it. We love hearing from you. Until next time, bye.